I'm trying to see who's on your poster.
Oh, that one is that's a Jason Isbell, and the
Oh,
400 unit, and it was Father John Misty as well. Down
oh
at
my
the yeah,
gosh.
it was a good show that with Jade. Do you know Jade Bird?
Of course.
Yeah, Jade was the
Yeah.
opener, and then it was like a
Yeah.
joint headlining tour last year. It was fantastic. If only
That
it
was
wasn't raining.
that was the summer before last because they came through Meriwether Post Pavilion where we are.
Yeah, that might. I thought it was last year actually.
Was it last summer?
Yeah, it was last year, I think.
Oh God, it feels so many million years ago. So one of the reasons why I remember that show so well, because besides the fact that I love each of those artists so much,
Yeah,
I have been an enormous Father John Misty fan from the beginning when he went on his own.
yeah,
And I don't know if you've seen him much at all, but he's besides being an incredible artist, he's a very dicey performer. You never know what's going to get him into a bad mood with the
yeah,
audience. And it's like he's always trying to pick on the audience somehow or
yeah,
another. Um, but so you never know. But anyway, so we had him at Meriwether Post Pavilion,
yeah,
and I sat in my seat, and it's the pavilion, so there's this big pit where people can stand ahead of them, and then I'm a few rows back behind there.
yeah.
And I remember looking up, and I was like, wow, he's got such a big band with him, because when I first saw him tour, it was just Father John Misty and his guitar, and that
Yeah,
was
it was huge.
it.
Yeah,
And this was really big. So I was going like this. I was counting the number of people, and he stops and after after the first song, and he looks at me from, I don't know, like 80 feet away, 100 feet away, more than that. And he said, and he has no idea who I am. I'm just somebody in the audience all the way
yeah.
back. And he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but were you counting us?" And I'm like, I'm looking around. I was like, he's talking to me. And I was like, yeah. And he said, "Do you have OCD or something?" And I was like, yes, I don't. But I said yes, because I was like, oh my gosh,
They just finished the
I thought,
conversation.
he's going to pick on somebody. This time it was me.
Yeah, yeah. I
So,
have to say, it was my first. It was my first experience seeing him live, and
mhm.
I've heard some of his music before. But yeah, I got the feeling that he may be a bit like that. I mean, when he played that show in Chicago, he was effectively wearing like pajama pants
Yeah.
and a suit jacket. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting look to go for. I mean, he pulled it off. Don't get me wrong, but
Oh no, he could. He is
yeah,
absolutely captivating.
yeah, he
And
is a great performer.
sometimes he wears Gucci shoes with it, which is just
Yeah,
so unexpected.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
wrote, I think, with him and with Jason, you know, like we review a lot of music for the website, and I only became really aware of Jason Isbell when we moved over here. So we're from the UK. I'm not sure I'd have known him as well if I'd been in the UK, but I
yeah,
think with him and then the way that he writes, and then with actually with Father John Misty as well, it's kind of like they just put everything out there. I think honesty when you're a songwriter is probably the most sort of enticing thing for people. If
yeah,
you think someone's being genuinely honest, with Father John, I think it's kind of sometimes to the detriment of his health. You know, in terms of
yeah.
how.
Yeah. I mean, he does worry me as a human. I mean, I fell madly in love with him at the start, and I
Yeah,
give a lot of things, but there are some people who I worry about their physical and emotional and
yeah,
health
yeah,
and mental health. And you're right, he puts a lot out there, but
yeah,
he can be so funny. He's clearly ridiculously bright.
yeah,
And you talk about being able to be honest and candid, and that's what goes into the songwriting, but it's
yeah,
also that type of an intellect and that type of a depth
yeah.
and the way to have they form their emotion and their
Yeah.
expression. And
I would
Jason Isbell, I mean, that was just such an amazing tour.
yeah,
Oh my God.
absolutely. It was a great tour, and then last year we went down to we went and saw Shoals Fest, the festival that
Oh,
he put on, down
oh,
at Muscle Shoals. It was amazing. I mean, the whole festival day was fantastic anyway. With the artists, because like Mavis Staples, Sheryl Crow, Amanda Shires, and Jason Isbell. And then they had a couple of smaller stages with John Paul White's record label, had some bands on there.
Okay.
Beautiful venue. It was boiling hot day. And then we got to go and see all these like super famous places, like the Muscle Shoals recording studios and stuff where the Wrecking Crew were. It was awesome. So I was kind of, you know, at the beginning of this year, before COVID, we were like just looking out because I was sure he was going to do that same festival again. I'm like, we're definitely going to that one again. And then, yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
Strange times.
To say the least. That's
Yeah.
the biggest understatement of the day.
Yeah, but I mean, thanks so much for taking the time to come on and talk to us. And you guys are great at putting information out. There's a lot of information out there, but I kind of just wanted to sort of talk to you and put this up so there was, you know, something on video as well where we could talk about some of this stuff, and certainly talk about where people can help, where they can go to see what you guys are doing, and what they can do when they're there. And I guess to start with, I mean, you are communications director for NIVA, and NIVA, it was actually, so this is an organization that's been created, I mean, very quickly in reaction to the COVID crisis, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, there was no such thing as NIVA.
Yeah.
There was no organization for independent venues. And very quickly, within a week or two of the pandemic hitting, we realized each of us, oh my gosh, we're going to need to get together to create a voice and to lobby, because the first to close and will undoubtedly be the last to open. And without federal support, we're doomed. It is, I cannot over dramatize the circumstances when, you know, if you picture zero revenue and all the overhead month after month with no ability to plan for it. And on top of that, when all the shows had to get canceled, it was like a vacuum cleaner to our bank accounts. For all those shows that we had sold tickets for, had spent money on marketing and preparing for, but customers get their money back, of course. And then, so no revenue, all the overhead, and then it's just been devastating. But so we formed very quickly, and considering we didn't exist until April, I guess it was, we have about 2,000 independent venues and promoters as members, and in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. So very quickly this came together, and also very quickly we hired the #1 lobbying firm in D.C. because we knew that we needed to have people who really knew what they were doing, understood the system. And it's not like you could get a lobbyist to, you know, bump into a contact. There's no bumping into people anymore. They had to have the connections in their phone, and the phone get picked up. And we needed to have their help in knowing what to ask for and how to ask. And it has been, it's been an amazing experience in terms of what we've been able to accomplish so far. Between building the organization, getting the word out through saveourstages.com, which is the grassroots support. So people who care about their venues can ask Congress to support NIVA and the venue operators. And so far we've had more than 500,000 people, or 500,000 emails sent to Congress, which is mind-blowing. 500,000.
I wanted to, I mean, so saveourstages.com is where people can go. And I think the other thing I wanted to get across, because reading the information you've put out, and you already said it, I mean, to say that it was a shock to me when I read some of it. I mean, 90% of the NIVA members, and you're saying how many members you have now, saying that without additional federal funding, they go out of business within a few months. I mean, that's how serious it is, 90% of those venues.
It hurts my stomach every time I have to say those numbers, 90%. And I mean, it just stands to reason. Zero revenue, rent, utilities, insurance, mortgages, other loans. The cost of doing business is something that these independent venues can handle under normal circumstances, of course. They've been able to withstand all sorts of recessions and 9/11 and when the gas went through the roof and when the mortgages went down, they were able to, right the ship. And they're
Yeah.
used to being captains of their own ship, and they're used to being able to figure it out. Well, this is the one time where there's nobody who can figure this out on their own, because it's impossible.
Yeah.
None of us are publicly traded companies, and we don't have the Wall Street backstop that the mega companies have.
Yeah.
We've been able to figure it out on our own up until now. And so why this matters so much, not just to music lovers like you and me,
Yeah.
who live for live music, and it's kind of like my sanctuary and my church and the thing that I look forward to so much. And it's where I go um, to relish art and to be with friends and strangers enjoying the same thing at the same time. It's that to so many people. But the other thing it is all these venues are so important to the communities that they are in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it not just for the art, but for the economic return that they kick off to the rest of the community.
Yeah.
So for every dollar spent at a small venue, that there was a study that showed that $12 in economic um, activity resulted
Yeah.
as well. And so, so all of the restaurants near us and hotels near us and either parking or public transportation near us all depend on the venues operating.
Yeah. And I
And
think it's,
if they're allowed to fail,
yeah.
Main Street USA fails.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the music ecosystem fails,
Yeah.
because all the artists that have been playing from their living room doing live streams,
Yeah.
that all they want to do is one day get on a bus and tour again.
Yeah.
If the places they used to come and play are all boarded up, where are they to go?
Yeah.
And then how does the next superstar get
How do
discovered?
new artists come through? That's what I
Right.
was going to talk to that. I mean, this is, independent venues are really the feeder system for the music industry, right? And then
Yeah.
particularly today, when, revenue from music sales isn't what it used to be, most artists are, if not entirely, very heavily dependent upon touring revenue. And if we open up again and 90% of those venues are gone, where are those artists going to tour? I mean,
Right.
it's impossible.
And then where are those artists going to tour? And then how are new artists going to be able to get their break?
Yeah, how are they going to?
And there was I'd read there's a study that said 75% of artist income comes from touring now.
Yeah.
And that is understandable, because as you say, it's not like artists make a lot of money by selling albums
Yeah.
anymore. That's not where it's at. It's getting on the road, selling tickets, getting paid that way, selling merch and your albums at the show.
Yeah.
That's where it's at.
Yeah, and
And
a ton of the artists we speak to, we talk to artists who drive themselves across the country
yeah,
and play at venues like, I don't know, like the Metro in Chicago or the Empty Bottle, the Hideout, somewhere like that.
right,
It's those kind of venues in every city that keep that. That's the supply chain, right? That's
right.
the if it breaks, then yeah, I mean and honestly, it I came to this, Audrey, and I knew it was bad, but once I started reading it, which is why we wanted to talk to you, I just honestly hadn't realized quite how bad it was. And some of it's sensible. And I think it's important maybe to go back to that point that we were discussing, which is, these are slightly different than your normal business. So one thing, they've been run by people who just genuinely love music to start with, but also they have this overhead cost. So not only have they got their mortgage, they've got all their bills to pay, they've had to refund ticket sales because of cancelled shows. And I think it's important that people understand that, because some people will say, well, there was the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program. That's not sufficient to bail these guys out, right? It's in
No.
any way.
I wish that were the case,
Yeah.
and that is an important part of what we're trying to communicate. The CARES Act with the PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan, had great intentions. It just didn't suit our industry. And I say that because, first of all, we were all made to shut down. Understandably, we need to have health and safety first. But if you don't and so we all had to furlough our employees.
Yeah.
So if you don't have employees, you cannot pay them.
Yeah.
And the provisions of PPP is that you have to bring them back and pay them within 8 weeks. Well, first of all, we're still not open. The 8 weeks have come and gone, and we can't pay people who are that are furloughed and now getting unemployment.
Yeah.
So what we're asking for is a modification, so the program would allow us to use those to borrow that money for things like rent and all the fixed overhead costs that we don't control, that we have to pay in order to not get shut out of our buildings, so that when the world does open up again, we can welcome people back in. So that's one of the really important things that we try to let people know. We wish that the Small Business Administration loans did the trick for us. Sadly, it doesn't. The same thing with PPP, because we're completely shuttered, and we don't know when we're going to get to open. For instance, while I wear the hat of communications director for NIVA, in my real job, my day job, I get to have that same title with the 930 Club and Meriwether Post Pavilion and the Anthem and the Lincoln Theater in DC. We have 4 venues. And in Washington, DC, the rule right now is there are no gatherings of 250 or more until there's a vaccine. And there's no financial plan for that. And so that's why we need the government to come step in, help us along until we can come back and be that economic engine for the community again.
So in terms of fans of music and people who want to educate themselves a little bit about this, I mean, if you head to Save Our Stages, so one of the pieces here and part of the lobbying that you're doing, my understanding is around the Restart Act, which you guys support, which is a bipartisan bill that's being put forward by Michael Bennett and Todd Young. And that's effectively a bill that is going to provide funding, I think, for the next 6 months or so, and some easements on paying that back into the future that should at least help some of these venues through the hardest times.
That is a piece of legislation that, yes, we are supporting. And I would say Restart is a start. That is that will help us. That's only 6 months, and we don't know when we're going to get to be open again. So it would be enormously helpful. The other thing that we are also seeking are some relief through different tax programs. And that would be tremendously helpful as well. And everything else that the industry has access to are tiny band-aids when you've got a gutted wound. People say, well, what about GoFundMe and selling t-shirts and live streams and drive-in concerts? Those are all lovely ideas, and I don't want to take away from them. But that is not going to save this industry. That's not going to save a business. It won't.
No, the industry is bleeding out effectively.
This is not $1 million problem. It's $1 billion problem. And but again, if we do get the support from the government, the good news is this will be an incredible investment. Because then we're going to come out and just really kick it. When time comes. But if we're not around, then we can't. The other thing that's unique to this industry is we basically need there to be uniformity in the opening across the country, because for tours to occur, they have to be able to travel to all the different areas of the country, or it's not going to work. There's no tour that's going to stay in Montana and Wyoming and the Dakotas and have top tier artists say, okay, well, that's a financial decision I'm willing to make, because they can't make it like that. So there's got to be the uniformity, and there also has to be a sense that we can. It's got to be more than like in some places they're opening at 25% capacity.
Yeah.
That too is an idea where I can understand how it's appealing, but
Mhm.
that sadly that won't work either, because we, for instance, the 930 Club,
Yeah.
we have a 1,200 person venue right now under the if set aside the vaccine provision that we would have
Yeah.
to have a vaccine. Let's pretend that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
It would based on the square footage and what the requirements would be, we would only be allowed to have 90 people in the room
You can't.
instead of 1,200. So, and that includes the staff and all, of
I was
course.
going to say you would have to staff it probably
Right.
with
And
similar levels as if it was full.
you do have to. I mean, it, we're not there yet because
Yeah.
we're not allowed, but
Mhm.
you would need more staff to make sure that people go where they need to go,
Yeah.
queue up how they need to queue up. Normally, our lines go around the block when it's time to the doors to open, and there are 3, 4 people wide, and they're all crunched together, and that's fun. Well,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen now.
Yeah.
But the other thing is about the percentage. It's that would make sense if our rent was 25%,
Yeah.
and the acts were only getting 25%, and our utility bill went to 25%,
Yeah.
and everything was on a sliding scale based on that. But since it isn't, it's just not workable.
Yeah.
And there's some NIVA members that are in different parts of the country, and I talk to them every day saying, hey, what's going on where you are, because and it changes every day
Yeah.
also, what people are allowed to do, and then some things are rolled back and some things are loosened. But there was a fellow in Oklahoma, and he was allowed to open, and he was so cautious about how to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody is so concerned with doing it right and doing it safely.
Yeah.
And he opened up for 2 weeks at his very reduced capacity, and he's like, I lost so much money in those 2 weeks. The crazy thing is losing more money being open than being closed.
Yeah, which is terrible, right? And
Yeah,
it really is, and I think these kind of conversations and explaining this is really important, because it's it really is important that people understand how serious this is and why the measures that are there at the moment aren't sufficient.
right.
And I think, already, like we said at the outset, so you've got over 500,000 signatures, right, on from the website, from Save Our Stages. I
Right.
think from my perspective, my suggestion would be to anyone watching this to go to Save Our Stages, to go to NIVA's website, because you guys are putting great information up there, and particularly, what you were just talking about, that was interesting to me as well, which is kind of, that thing about everyone opening up at once, because if there's one break in the chain, it breaks up an entire national tour potentially, and means that can't take place. That's something I hadn't even thought of in all of this. So I think there's great information up there for people who want to know more. And you can go there, you can sign up to contact your representative. You don't even have to write the email. It's all written for you on the website. You just have to put your name to it and send it off. And that should really help the cause, right? At least it's something tangible people can do.
It's really important, and it's kind of crazy, but it seems to be working,
Yeah.
because working from the perspective of people in Congress need to know that their constituents care about something for them to pay attention.
Yeah.
And especially now when there's so many people coming asking for help, it's it's understandable. It's like part of it is the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
And it's also incredibly amazing that so many people have come out, because in March there was no NIVA. So
Yeah.
for people in Congress to be sponsoring legislation that we're proposing,
Yeah.
because they're hearing from their constituents, and it's bipartisan, which is so rare nowadays. I don't have to tell
It's
anybody that.
extremely rare in today's
And
world.
but the way when people get to learn what it is that we're facing, they realize it's not a blue issue, it's not a red issue, it's a green issue.
Yeah.
It's about investing some money in order to make sure that the community will be prospering from it
Yeah.
at the back end of this.
Yeah.
And we are incredibly proud that we've been able to tell our story from the perspective of our everyday life,
Yeah.
and both sides of the aisle get it and want
Yeah.
to help. But we need to take this across the finish line, because we basically have just a handful of weeks left before Congress goes to summer recess. They
Yeah.
break in August, and we've got to get these bills passed between now and then, or it's going to be too late.
Yeah.
I have to say that it's really that grave. Um, they go on recess for the month of August, and then um, what I'm told is that in an election year, nothing, no bills really get
Yeah.
drafted and laws don't get passed in the September and October leading up to the November election.
Yeah.
So, and by then, it's going to be too late for so many of the venues. And I can't stand saying it, but I get notes almost every day about one, two, or three are going,
Yeah.
and it just breaks my heart.
It's horrendous, and I think that if people watching this take anything out of it, it's really, the urgency of this, and how important it is. If you can do
Yeah,
anything, go and sign that, go and reach out to your representative. You can donate money on there to NIVA or to venues as well. If you go over to Save Our Stages, see what your local venues are doing anyway, if you can support them.
right.
But it's really, I mean, it's it's really critical, and that's why I did want to talk to you. I mean, I just want to get across to anyone who's going to watch this how critical it actually is.
Yeah,
We all love music. If you come into our website, the chances are you love music, right? Every artist I've spoken to recently, they're doing what they can to get by. They're doing live streams, they're doing things like that. But
mhm,
all of us, whenever I've spoken to any artist, the thing that lights everyone up the most is, I'm like, imagine the first time you get back on that stage. And I'm imagining the first time I'm back in an audience in some sweaty room somewhere, waiting for the band to come on, be really excited about what's coming up. We're not going to have it if we don't do this. If something doesn't happen, that's not going to be there anymore. And that's a part of life that personally I can't live without. And I think a lot of us are the same. So that's what I wanted to. That's why I wanted to talk. I mean, the other thing I wanted to mention as well is the letter that went with the artist's signatures. I mean, how
yeah.
many was it? Over 600 on
Over
there?
600 signatures from artists that cared so much about keeping venues safe,
Yeah,
that they sent a letter to Congress asking, please, these are the stages that we got our start. This is where we come back to. These are our homes. It's where we hone our craft.
yeah,
We can have a career without it, and it means everything to the community.
yeah,
So they have asked Congress to please consider NIVA's needs and to fund the venues.
yeah.
And
That's it.
the outpouring was phenomenal. And I mean, every genre, people from every decade
Yeah.
practically. I mean,
That's what I
Mozart did
noticed on the
fine.
list. It was like straight off. I was like, "Oh, there's Robert Plant's name,"
Yeah,
and then, I was like, and then people like right up to date. It was just everybody,
right.
every genre, every age.
Yeah. I mean, I was saying from Billy Joel to Billie Eilish to Billy Porter.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
I mean, it was from every decade, every genre,
yeah,
and but it says how much it means to them. Obviously, this is their place of business,
yeah,
but it's also places that they have such an emotional connection with.
yeah,
They I swear it's so crazy how artists will remember particular shows at particular venues with,
yeah,
like, it's locked into, it's frozen into their memory,
yeah,
and how they can reel it off. And it's because it's where they are to, they get the luck there. This
yeah,
is their, um, it's their other home, and it's a
yeah,
place that they travel long and hard for, to get to be there, and at great personal expense in terms of, I mean, I can't imagine driving around the country in a van with my coworkers.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, I mean, I've spoken to people who've driven themselves solo across the
yeah,
country, in their own car, just driven around going to gigs. And I mean, it's not the dedication of the artists to do that, and to just pitch in and go after what you love, with no guarantees. That, but also you know, the owners of these venues, it's probably important to say as well, these aren't people who are millionaires. They're not making millions of dollars from running and owning these venues. They do it because they love music, and you know, and they want to give that stage to artists, right? They want to
Yes,
provide something that allows the next generation of artists, or whoever it may be, to come and play music for people and
right.
develop their career. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
important to mention as well.
I think so too.
Yeah,
And the other thing that a lot of people don't think about, because why would they, is the lighting person and the
yeah,
guitar tech and
yeah,
the person who drives the bus if they're lucky enough to have a bus,
yeah,
and the person who does the catering when they come in town.
yeah,
There's so many tentacles on this.
yeah, absolutely.
And I have a friend who is an amazing tour manager and lighting designer. And
Yeah,
when it's, and of course everybody in the industry is checking in with their buds and their pals. How are you doing? How are you managing?
yeah,
And not just financially, we want to know how you're doing,
yeah,
how you're getting through the day. How are you staying sane? Do you need to talk?
yeah,
And one of them, one of my buddies, is taking to, he ended up quarantining in his dad's house,
mm,
and his dad had a little backyard, and he started gardening from the first time.
yeah,
And I see his beautiful pictures, and he tells me, every picture you see, I did that,
yeah,
but I want to be in your venue.
yeah. This is it. Yeah,
That's all I'm living for when I'm thinking about digging another hole and fertilizing something. And
yeah,
yes, this lettuce is beautiful,
yeah,
but I want to be in your venue.
yeah. It's exactly the same. So talking to the musicians, you know, it's like, yeah, we're doing this, we're getting by. And you know, I was speaking to Joe Pug, and he does like a Sunday night feed every Sunday now.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays sort of an online show and streams a show, and he's been doing live shows for people, you know, where he'll do it for 3 or 4 people, and they can interact with him. And you know, he said, yeah, it's great, but every musician wants to be back on the stage. They just
Yeah,
want to be back on the stage,
yeah,
and the venues as well. You know, it's a livelihood to the bar staff, the security guys, everybody who works in there. So I think I did want to say, you know, in terms of you guys, NIVA, I mean, what a fantastic thing you've done there, because the amount of time, you know, the short time frame in which you've got organized, you've got set up, and had the impact that you've had is unbelievable. And like you said, you pushed through, or helped facilitate a bipartisan bill, which in today's climate is virtually unheard of. Um,
we also, well, we haven't pushed it through yet.
yeah, well, you put it on the table. Yeah,
Yeah, we we did get a letter from the Senate to the leadership, and a letter to that from the House to
yeah,
leadership, and both of those were bipartisan. And it just so happens that the things that we were asking for
yeah.
were pretty much existed in the restart. So when we
Okay,
saw that that was happening, we're like,
yeah,
oh wait, yes,
we'll go for that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So then, because that's what we were hoping for.
yeah,
We were using all of our time and energy and effort
yeah,
to push that. And everybody associated with the association
mm,
is all volunteer.
yeah.
Everybody is donating 19 jillion hours a week to this, because we can't not.
No, and you're all deeply
It.
affected by it, right? I mean, you're all venue owners, or involved with the venues. And
And so many of the people are, furloughed and on unemployment and doing this as a volunteer thing, or furloughed and not on unemployment.
yeah,
Some people uh, are not, but it's dire, as
yeah,
I say, it's dire. And the venue owners, it just so hard for me to think about the days when I would talk to them and say, I just had to furlough 250 people, and I've just spent the last 24 hours crying. So
yeah,
can we talk about this tomorrow?
yeah.
Yes, we can talk about
Yeah,
it
it's
tomorrow.
horrendous. Yeah,
It's not just most of us, everybody who I've talked to anyway, it's not employees,
yeah,
it's your family.
yeah,
These people who you work with side by side are your family.
Yeah.
And this is, in so many ways, it's everybody's hardest dream job in the world.
Yeah.
That, and it is really hard to picture a world without it.
Yeah.
But it's impossible to picture a world with it unless we get the help.
Exactly. And no, and we don't want to picture a world without. I mean, that can't become a reality. And I think, you know, yeah, as I've said probably about 5 times already, if you're watching this, go to Save Our Stages, go to NIVA, put your name on there, and make your voice heard. If you're lucky enough to still have a job, donate a bit of cash. But it's really, I mean, in closing, just again, this is really, really serious. Go and read the information, go and read how desperate this situation is, and do whatever you can to help. I think should be the message from this.
I thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for coming on, Audrey. And as I say, thanks to you and the guys who are running NIVA, you know, to try and help out, like what you're doing to help out for everyone, right? For the artists, for the venue owners, for the audience.
Right.
It's really important.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All the best to you. Stay healthy.
You too. Enjoy the July 4th weekend.
Okay. Yeah. What are you going to do? What can you do?
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe you can go in the garden and have a grill or something like that.
July 4th, is it? Okay, if you say so.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.